So I want you to try something for a second.
Yeah.
I want you to imagine that your consciousness, like the very awareness you are experiencing right now as you listen to this, your inner monologue, your sense of self, is not actually something your brain creates.
Right.
Instead, imagine your consciousness is this complex cosmic frequency, and your brain is really just the physical receiver picking up the signal.
It's a profound shift in perspective, isn't it? You go from seeing yourself as a biological machine that somehow mysteriously generates a spark of life out of mere chemistry,
Yeah.
to seeing yourself as a highly tuned instrument, like deliberately designed to capture something infinite.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective is the entire foundation for our deep dive today. We are exploring this truly fascinating intersection where quantum mechanics, metaphysics, and ancient Jewish tradition all seem to just crash into each other.
It really is fascinating.
We're pulling our insights today from a deeply thought-provoking article by Rabbi Shlomo Azagi, and it's titled The Sacred Entanglement, Soul, Body, and the Case for Burial.
Yeah, it's a remarkable piece of writing, and the mission of our deep dive today is to really step inside the traditional Jewish perspective on the afterlife. But more specifically, we are going to focus on the deeply held, structurally profound reasons why traditional burial is so heavily emphasized in this tradition.
Right.
And conversely, why cremation is strictly prohibited.
Before we jump into the deep end, though, to be clear for you listening, our goal today isn't to take a side or, endorse a specific religious theology or tell you what objectively happens after we die.
Absolutely not, no.
We are strictly stepping inside the framework presented by Rabbi Zagwi to understand the fascinating logic and the internal consistency behind this ancient tradition. Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand what the text says happens to the body in death, we have to first understand what exactly is inhabiting the body during life, right?
That is definitely the best place to start. The text presents a consistently layered model of reality. Within the Jewish conception, which is primarily found in Kabbalistic literature like the Zohar and the foundational Hasidic text called the Tanya,
Right.
the soul, the neshama, is not described as just one single monolithic ghost in the machine.
Yeah, it's not just like a glowing amorphous orb floating around inside your ribcage.
No, not at all. The texts actually describe it as a 5-stage spectrum of light. They use the Hebrew word or for this light, and it interfaces with physical vessels, which are called kilim.
Oh, interesting.
So think of it as a hierarchy of energy levels, right? Stepping down from the infinite into the finite. And at the most granular foundational level of the spectrum, you have the nefesh.
Which the text refers to as the biological engine, if I'm remembering right.
Exactly. The nefesh is the functional life force. The classical texts root it primarily in the blood referencing the verse in Deuteronomy, for the blood is the soul. And they physically associate it with the liver.
The liver, wow. Okay.
Yeah. It governs instinct, survival, cellular homeostasis. And we use quantum terms to understand this ancient concept. The nefesh represents a state of maximal entanglement with physical matter.
Wait, hold on. I want to make sure I understand how that actually works. How does spiritual light entangle with the liver?
Well, it has to do with something called decoherence. So in quantum physics, when a quantum system interacts with its environment, it loses its superposition.
Its state of infinite possibility.
Right, and it collapses into a single defined physical reality. The nefesh is the point of greatest decoherence.
Okay, I think I'm tracking.
It is where infinite spiritual potential collapses into the very specific localized job of, pumping blood, filtering toxins, keeping cells alive. This interface is literally what allows the physical body to resist entropy.
Because without the active binding of the nefesh, the biological systems just surrender to standard thermodynamics and begin to break down into inert matter. So the nefesh is the base layer, like the anchor keeping the physical structure intact.
Yeah.
And then moving up the spectrum, we have the ruach.
Ascending from the nefesh, yes, you encounter the ruach. And the texts say this resides centrally in the heart.
The heart, okay.
This level takes that raw biological vitality and elevates it. So it governs emotion, moral awareness, our capacity for relational depth. It's really the bridge between mere survival and actual feeling.
Makes sense. And above that?
And above that is the nesama proper, which is associated with the brain and the intellect. It's the level of self-reflection, complex thought, and the conscious pursuit of meaning.
Which brings us right back to that opening thought. So if the brain doesn't generate awareness ex nihilo, meaning like out of nothing, is it essentially just a high-tech biological radio receiver for these higher frequencies?
Yeah, the text frames it remarkably similarly. The development of higher cognition, all the complex folding of the prefrontal cortex, it basically functions as an antenna capable of receiving higher order consciousness. The brain acts as a transducer.
Like a device that converts one form of energy into another.
Exactly like that. I mean, think of a microphone.
Right.
A microphone is a transducer. It turns acoustic sound waves into electrical signals.
Yeah.
According to this Kabbalistic framework, the human nervous system is a biological transducer. It steps down infinite, uncontainable divine energy into a localized, functional, lived experience that a human being can actually process without being totally overwhelmed.
That is just wild to think about. I mean, I want you to consider your own prefrontal cortex right now as you're listening to this. Consider that this complex the web of neurons isn't the generator of your deepest thoughts, but rather the highly calibrated antenna catching your specific localized identity from a much broader spectrum of light. And according to the text, the spectrum doesn't even end at the brain, does it? There are two more levels above it.
There are. The highest two levels are called chaya and yatita. And this is where the quantum comparisons become incredibly apt. These levels correspond to what the Kabbalists call the surrounding lights, or Or Makif. They are so vast, so intense, that they cannot be internalized within the physical boundaries of the human body.
So they are what, just hovering around us?
Well, not hovering in a spatial sense, but conceptually encompassing us. Chaya expresses pure will and transcendent desire, while Yakita represents absolute, indivisible unity. It's the point where the soul and the divine source are entirely one.
Oh, wow.
And the text explains that these top two levels are never fully entangled with the physical body. They remain in a constant state of superposition.
So simultaneously within and completely beyond the individual's localized identity.
Precisely.
Wait, hold on. I need to push back on this for a second. If these top two levels, Chaya and Yakita, are in superposition and never fully entangled with the body, why do they care what happens to the physical form?
What do you mean?
Well, if I have a billion-dollar communication satellite in orbit, it doesn't really care if the tiny plastic TV antenna on the ground gets smashed, right? The satellite is fine. It's pure, unbothered energy.
That's a great challenge. But it assumes the satellite and the TV antenna are totally separate entities with different goals.
Okay.
In this Jewish framework, they aren't. They were built for a single, shared, sacred mission. The infinite light of the higher soul levels wants to express itself in the finite physical world. Without the biological TV antenna on the ground, the satellite's broadcasts are invisible.
Oh, I see.
The physical body isn't just a random piece of hardware the soul happened to stumble into. It is a covenantal partner.
A covenantal partner.
Yeah.
Meaning they have a binding agreement, a shared project.
Yes, exactly. The body provides the context of friction, of time and space that allows the infinite soul to perform actions, mitzvot, good deeds, choices.
Right.
The higher soul relies on the physical body to anchor its light. So during life, the soul acts as this intense binding field, holding this whole complex structure together.
Which really makes you wonder, if the soul acts as this intense binding field, holding infinite light and physical matter in this incredibly delicate balance, why doesn't the connection just cleanly snap the moment the heart stops beating? I mean, why isn't death instantaneous?
What's fascinating here is how the text addresses the mechanics of that separation using the Kabbalistic concept of symptom.
Symptom.
Yeah. It translates roughly to contraction or concealment. It's the profound idea that for a finite physical world to exist at all, the Creator had to contract or hide the infinite divine light.
Because otherwise it would just be too much.
Right. If infinite light were fully revealed, finite reality would instantly dissolve back into it, completely overwhelmed. So human life, is the active period where these higher infinite soul levels are coupled to the physical body through an ongoing state of symptom.
Okay.
Death is the gradual, deliberate unbinding of that contraction.
The sources provide some really interesting details on how that unbinding works, too. It's definitely not a binary on and off state where 1 second you are fully entangled and the next second the soul is just completely gone.
No. The tradition understands it as a process. The Talmud famously states that sleep is 1/60th of death.
1/60th, wow.
Yeah, the idea is that every single night, there is a daily partial disengagement of the soul from the body. It's a temporary loosening of that intense coupling, allowing the biological system to rest and the soul to recharge.
So when actual permanent physical death occurs, It is basically a continuation of that unbinding process, just on a final massive scale.
Precisely. The higher soul levels, the intellect and those transcendent levels of chaya and yerkido we talked about, they return to their source quite quickly. But the nefesh, that foundational biological engine and elements of the ruach, they linger.
They stay behind for a bit.
Yeah. The Zohar describes the soul actually remaining near the body after death, deeply aware of what is happening to its physical counterpart.
Okay, but this brings up another lingering question for me. Even if they are partners, the mission is over. The heart has stopped. The brain is off. Why is there this lingering sensitivity from the soul toward a body that is no longer functioning?
It comes down to the concept of kavod hamet, which is the strict obligation in Jewish law to treat the deceased body with profound dignity.
Right.
Think about how the text frames the body. It is not viewed as a discarded shell. It isn't like a candy wrapper that you just toss in the trash once you've eaten the sweet inside.
Yeah.
As the Zohar teaches, the very limbs of the physical body became vehicles for holiness through every action performed in life.
Because the physical flesh was the actual transducer that allowed the spiritual light to manifest.
Exactly.
Like the hand that gave charity or the feet that walked to help a neighbor.
The matter itself became sanctified by what it did. So within this window of lingering connection, while the nefesh is slowly disengaging from the biological matter it was so deeply entangled with, the soul is acutely sensitive to how its partner is treated.
And understanding that sensitivity brings us directly to the core divergence of our deep dive. Because if the soul lingers and the body remains a sanctified partner, then the method by which we part with the physical form becomes a profoundly important theological statement.
It does.
This isn't just a debate about what's environmentally friendly or practically convenient. This is the root of the intense focus on traditional burial over cremation.
Yeah, the text draws a very sharp, uncompromising contrast between the two, based entirely on the physics and metaphysics of entanglement we've just discussed. Let's look at the mechanics of traditional burial first.
Okay.
From this perspective, burial allows for a gradual, metaphysically calibrated release. The famous verse from Genesis 3:19 says, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return.
Yeah.
Psalms echoes this, noting that when the breath is taken away, we return to the dust.
So the earth itself plays a role in this. It's an active integration.
Very much so. The earth acts as a grounding mechanism. The process of decomposition in the soil is not seen as merely biological decay. It is a prescribed, structured unwinding. The earth absorbs and metabolizes.
Okay.
It allows the nefesh, that lowest level of the soul that is maximally entangled with the physical matter, to gently disengage at a natural pace.
A natural pace.
It transitions the energy from a localized individual entanglement back to a unified state. The Talmud in Sanhedrin emphasizes burial as a positive commandment, precisely because it completes this human-to-earth cycle with the necessary dignity.
And then on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you have the mechanics of cremation.
Which raises an important question. If burial is a gentle, natural unwinding, what is the nature of fire?
Right.
From a thermodynamic standpoint, fire is a violent chemical reaction. It breaks molecular bonds instantly. The text explains that cremation imposes abrupt erasure.
Wow. Abrupt erasure.
Yeah. It severs the delicate soul-body interface instantly. It violently destroys the body at the very moment of its separation, which is its most vulnerable state. It forces dissolution through an entropic, consuming medium rather than allowing reintegration through the Earth's generative processes.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The author of the article uses this brilliant cloud server analogy that I think makes the text's view on this crystal clear.
Yeah, that analogy is spot on.
If we think of the soul as the data in the cloud, and the body is the physical terminal or the laptop you're using, burial is like putting that terminal into a respectful, gentle sleep mode. It acknowledges the hardware did a great job.
Exactly.
But to me, reading this, cremation feels less like sleep mode and more like yanking a hard drive out of a computer while it is still actively spinning and syncing its final files to the cloud. You aren't just turning it off, you are actively corrupting the transition. It's like returning a rented tuxedo by throwing it into a wood chipper.
The rented tuxedo analogy is actually incredibly on point because it captures the relational dynamic of ownership perfectly. To validate why it's considered rented, we have to look at the core Jewish legal principle regarding who actually owns the human body. The prophet Ezekiel says, "The soul is mine and the body is mine."
Mine meaning the creator.
Yes. The human being is viewed as a steward of the body, not a proprietor. You don't own your body the way you own a car, where you can just decide to send it to the junkyard and have it crushed into a cube when you're done with it.
Right.
It is entrusted to you. The text poses a beautiful rhetorical point. You wouldn't destroy a magnificent instrument after playing a symphony on it.
No, of course not.
You wouldn't burn a Stradivarius violin just because the concert is over. The body's final role is not utility, its final role is dignity.
If we follow this logic, though, it brings us to a really critical crossroad. I mean, if we are just putting this biological terminal into sleep mode by gently burying it in the earth, what exactly are we waiting for? What is the ultimate end game of keeping this physical, localized imprint intact rather than just letting it be permanently erased by fire?
The endgame is one of the most foundational and perhaps most misunderstood principles of the Jewish faith. Tekiat hametim, the future resurrection of the dead.
Okay, resurrection.
This isn't just a fringe idea either. It is a core belief codified by Maimonides, the Rambam, in his 13 Principles of Faith. The reason cremation is considered such a profound violation in Jewish law is that it reflects a fundamentally different worldview, one that actively denies this future physical reality.
Because if you intentionally burn the hardware to ash, you're essentially making a declaration that says, I never expect to use this again, this story is permanently over.
Exactly. And the tradition introduces a fascinating physical concept here to explain how that future resurrection is even biologically possible. It comes from deep midrashic texts, and it's called the luzbone.
The luzbone. I have to admit, this was one of the most surprising concepts in the source material for me.
It is deeply esoteric. The luzbone is described as a tiny, indestructible physical element within the human anatomy, often associated with the top of the spine or the base of the skull.
Okay.
And the midrashic lore behind why it is indestructible is fascinating. The tradition says that this specific bone receives its nourishment differently than the rest of the body. Specifically, it was never nourished by the food Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge.
Wait, oh wow, so because it didn't participate in consuming the forbidden fruit, it didn't inherit the curse of mortality.
That is the exact theological logic. It was not subject to the decree of death. Metaphysically, the luzbone acts as a biological seed. It is the irreducible imprint of embodied existence. Yes. The texts explain that just as a massive oak tree can grow from a tiny, seemingly inert acorn planted in the earth, the future resurrection of the entire complex human being will arise from the luzbone. But if you expose the body to the absolute destruction of cremation, you are attempting to incinerate the seed itself.
So what does this all mean? If the soul is fundamentally eternal anyway, if those top levels of consciousness are basically hanging out in a quantum superposition of divine unity, why does it need a relationship to physical form and memory at all in the future?
Good question.
I mean, why is destroying the body seen as trying to erase the anchor of that continuity? Can't the soul just be happy being pure, unencumbered energy in the afterlife?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we hit the absolute beating heart of Jewish philosophy.
Yeah.
In many other ancient traditions, the physical world is seen as an illusion, or it's seen as a trap, something dirty and heavy that the pure, enlightened soul needs to escape from to reach nirvana. But in Judaism, the physical world is a vessel to be honored. The human being is not just physical matter that got briefly accidentally animated, nor is it a pure spirit that got tragically trapped in a meat suit. The human being is a deliberate, sacred fusion of the two, specifically willed by the Creator.
The texts call it dira bitachtonim, right?
Right.
The desire to make a dwelling place for the infinite right here in the lowest, most finite physical world.
Absolutely. The goal of the soul's journey isn't to escape the physical world. The goal is to elevate it. So when a family chooses traditional burial, they are making a profound theological statement that affirms that partnership.
They're expressing deep trust that the story is not over.
Yes. Burial declares that the same divine wisdom that successfully fused an infinite soul with a finite body the first time around possesses the ability to do it again in the future. It's an act of ultimate patience and ultimate fidelity to the structure of life itself.
That is incredibly powerful. It completely reframes the entire concept of what a funeral actually is.
It really does.
It's not just a sad gathering to say goodbye. It's an active, required process to honor the hardware that allowed the infinite to experience the finite.
And that, ultimately, is why the Jewish case for burial over cremation is so stringent. Cremation broadcasts a message that the physical body was just a temporary, meaningless shell to be discarded.
Yeah.
Burial insists that the physical body is a sanctified partner that deserves a metaphysically calibrated release. It respects the slow, deliberate unwinding of a sacred entanglement.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today, from the quantum decoherence of the nefesh and biological transducers to ancient Kabbalistic concepts of Simsum and the indestructible seed of the Lisbon. But before we wrap up this deep dive into Rabbi Izagi's framework, there is one final provocative thought from the source text that we want to leave you with.
Something to ponder.
Exactly, something for you to chew on as you go about the rest of your day.
The text notes a beautiful mirroring parallel in how we are designed. Biological systems convert energy into life. For example, your mitochondria transform light-derived energy from the food you eat into the cellular function that lets you move and breathe.
Right.
In the exact same way, the soul transforms divine influx into thought, emotion, and tangible action in the world.
So, if your body is literally designed to be a physical transducer, a sacred antenna anchoring infinite light into the finite physical world, how might that change the way you view your most mundane physical routines today?
It's a complete paradigm shift. It makes the ordinary extraordinary.
It really does. As you walk to your car or type on your keyboard or make a cup of coffee this afternoon, remember the symphony analogy.
Yes.
If your physical body is a borrowed sacred instrument, what kind of symphony is your hardware playing right now?
A question worth carrying with you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.